Okay. Good evening, everyone. We're just gonna jump straight into it. I'm gonna share my screen. I know this is a Sunday evening. We just want to look at weekly commentary to see the direction of the market. We're going to be anticipating our moves for this week, right? Before I start, I would just like to let everyone know. If you can hear me, Kesh, if you can hear me, if you can hear me, just drop the chat in the chat box so I know that I'm audible enough and you guys can all hear me, right? Just drop a chat in the chat box. Let me know if you can hear me. Okay. So we just get right straight into it. For this week, like my custom is and how we look in the God of Indices strategy and the way we look at the chart, right? We always want to check from the weekly. I always don't want to go too far in the month because uh, we day trade and we scalp, right? So we are not long-term position holder or we don't do short-term trading that we hold for weeks or months. So we want to always want to stick with the weekly and the daily as our higher time frame bias to give us direction for where the market would like to go. Looking at GU, trade GU, EU, and please note that every analysis done on GU, it's GU is about 87 to 100% correlated with EU. So you could also apply the move similarly. And you know that every analysis on GU or EU will be the inverse on DXY. So I always just like to stick to GU for straightness and to avoid complications of having to analyze both the XY and the associated pairs, right? So briefly, if we look at the weekly time frame. We want to see what the general trend like. Because the questions we want to ask ourselves is that where is price coming from, where is price currently, and where is price heading to? So asking yourself that question will be able to let you get the bias for the market, right? I would like to quickly zoom out so we just get a brief look at what the market is doing, right? If we look at it, we see that the market was bearish, right? In the whole long-term view, market it was bearish coming down, right? So currently, the last point, the last lower high created has not yet been violated. So it's safe to say we are still bearish on GU on the weekly time frame, right? If you look at it from this point, you see this was the last lower high that led to this lower low. So we are dealing within this range now. If you draw your fib from this range from top to down, you always want to get your PD array zones, right? You see that we are deep into a premium of the range, right? We are into the premium of this particular dealing range, right? So asking us for the weekly bias, we know that we're still bearish on GU, right? And we're bearish and we're also in the premium zone, telling us that there's a high probability that this move is going to continue, right? Because we're way past the equilibrium, the 50% of the zone. So we are deep in premium. So anything here, most likely any PD array around the premium zone is going to hold price to continue to make price tank for GU, right? Like we say, I always say this here that there's nothing 100% guaranteed in the forex market, right? So we're always students to the market and anything can happen, right? So we just zoomed out to get a broader view to know what price is doing on the weekly. But if you look currently, where are we currently in price? Where are we currently in price? Remember, I said, where are we coming from? We've just looked at where we're coming from. Where are we currently in price? We are currently at a bearish order block, right? A bearish order block. And like we see our ground mentor ICT always says that any order block that has a fair value gap in it is high probability order block, right? See, there's a fair value gap here, the price And also there is, you see the order block. So I always want to mark the order blocks from the body, right? You see that price is rejecting off this order block. Price is rejecting off this order block, right? Because this is the extreme, right? For the supply and demand traders, you see this is the extreme supply because this was from this supply zone that initiated the entire move to the downside here, right? So we know from the broad perspective we looked at, we can see that this is still internal structure because the bigger picture on the weekly time frame is still bearish, right? So we see that also the structure price action is aligning with the bigger picture, which is bearish on the weekly time frame, right? And you see price respected and rejected nicely off this order block, and you see it respected the mean threshold, right? Mean threshold being the 50% of the order block, the midpoint of the order block. You see it respected nice and clear, right? I think let me put this order bearish and put another block. I think I have a way, the one that marks the mean threshold. Sorry. I want to be able to mark the one that marks. Let's just use this. Let's mark the midpoint of the zone. Yeah, let's mark the midpoint of the zone. Right. Let's make it black. So you see what I'm talking about. Okay, so you see price respected nicely. It rejected nicely at the main threshold of this other block being the 50% of the other block zone. You see price didn't close above it, but it's rejected. That's giving us an indication that price wants to continue in the direction of the higher time frame. But if we're looking at the internal structure here, you see that price had a bullish internal structure that goes to this extreme supply zone, right? You see the two things, two two zones that were marked out here, either the fair value gap or the order block. But you see the rejection given, you see price initially respected the fair value gap, but it violated it, but is respecting the extreme order block on the weekly time frame. So what does that tell us? It tells us that we most possibly going to want to continue to the downside here. Two things. And also if you look at the current price action, which is price action to your right, which is this leg of price. If we look at this particular leg of price, you see that this bullish leg also, if there's a possibility of price continuing to shift structure to continue bullish, to break structure and continue bullish, there needs to be a retracement into the internal range of this particular leg, right? If you draw your fib from down to here, you see that we are also still in premium, right? So many things are aligning for the bearish move, right? Because price will need to a little bit retrace, a little bit to discount of this range to continue. That does not say that price cannot just push up and just break structure up, but this is the high probability. We are looking at the possible scenario to price behavior right now. So but that's enough of looking at weekly. Weekly tells us that we are bearish in the long term. We see that price is rejecting off a weekly or an extreme order block. So, and it has rejected and closed below the opening candle of the previous candle, weekly candle. That also gives us a signification that we are most likely. So the first point of resistance in this place will be this weekly fair value gap here, right? This is where you are going to be watching out. If price wants to go up, this is going to hold price to go up, right? So you're going to be careful to watch how price reacts in this zone. But most likely, I'll be tilting for the bearish stand because you see that internal structure has aligned with the overall general structure, which is bearish, right? So hop down to our daily time frame. We want to see daily time because daily time frame is going to give us a clear direction. We want to see what structure is showing. We want to see how the candles are closing, right? Are closing beneath each other, right? So as we can see, you see the previous week, we see from Tuesday, we see we had bearish candle, bearish candle. So we have closed below the opening price of Monday candle, right? Monday candle, which was our last impulsive move to the upside that took out liquidity. Let me delete this. That took out liquidity of that zone, right? If you zoom out, you see that instead of on the weekly time frame, instead of price closing above, it was a liquidity run of that zone down. So also tells us that most likely we are heading um, into the internal range or internal liquidity, right? So what we are going to be looking at will be looking to fill this liquidity void here, right? This series of bullish delivery that did not give us any bearish. So there's a void there that price will most likely want to fill if it's going to continue to the upside, or price will want to run through it, right? So being day traders or scalpers that we are, we don't want to look at the long term of what price want to do. We want to see currently we know that we are bearish on the weekly time frame. If we look also on the daily time frame, we see that it's giving us bearish alignment because subsequent candles are closing below them. You see, even the previous day's candle, which was Friday's candle, the Friday closed below the close of the previous candle. So it also giving us a long week rejection. This is also an indication that price wants to continue to the downside, right? Like I also trade and we do in the God of indices strategy, GOI strategy. We also want to look at structure, what structure is presenting with our current dealing range. We want to look at what's the previous day's candle, the dealing range of the previous day's candle to give us an indication of which direction we want to trade or to hold the trend. If we want to trade counter trend or we want to continue the direction of the trend. So looking at the previous day's candle, we see that we are in the bearish scenario of the previous day's candle. We are in deep discount. So we'll want to look for PD arrays in premium that will most likely hold price to continue bearish, right? So looking at it, we have two here that are very, very obvious. We have a inversion, right? Inverted fair value gap, which is my very sweet spot for, it's our sweet spot for GOI strategy. We also always want to look at it, IFEG, inverted fair value gap, and also fair value gap. Like you can see this is a balanced price range, right? Have an inversion and a current, a bearish fair value gap too. Yeah, so most likely I'll be tilting for price to give us a retracement here and tank, right? Short term, this is what we're looking for, right? Because we see here that price also has taken the liquidity of this candle, right, to the downside and rejected off. So most likely we're going to go get a retracement into internal to continue bearish. So I'll be tilting, right? Like I say, Monday is normally not my trading day, but if you want to trade Monday, you'll be looking for this particular reactions or rejections for you to do your trading, right? So that gives us a brief and summarized view of what the market will be doing on GU side, because I always advise all my students and anybody that you can stick to one currency pair can give you every money you need. So stick to GU or you stick to EU, and everything I analyze here will most likely 80 to 90% be the inverse of the no need for us to go to the XY. So if you're looking for how the market is going to go into the week, we are bearish on GU. They are bearish on GU. But short term, you're looking to enter into market, you want to see the reaction of price to this zone. Yes, that's not to say that price cannot just continue just to tank, break this zone and just keep going down. It's a possibility, but also you always want to wait for those high probability setup and see how structure is playing out. So most likely for me to take my short-term day trading trades, I always want to look at what structure is giving me on the H1. I see H1 also, if we look at what price action is telling us, still bearish, right? Still bearish because we have not violated our last lower high, which was this zone, right? So this was lower high that led to the lower low. So we are still playing within this range, right? So most likely we're going to get a retracement here, then we'll turn. So thank you guys so much for joining on this call for our weekly commentary. If there are any questions or anything, you can quickly, I think you can unmute your mic. If there's any comments or anything, you can unmute your mic and let's hear it out. Thank you so much. There any comments or any question? You can unmute your mic. I think I've enabled you to unmute mic, or you can drop it on the chat. Thank you so much.